Hello and welcome to the Mike and Scott talk about baseball and life. Uh, we're getting close to the quarter stride or the whatever you call it. And since we had the Kentucky Derby or whatever this past weekend, um, at the quarter post, this weekend will be 40 games, I think, for most teams. Uh, we didn't have a chance last week to get together with my shoulder. My dad had things to do. Uh, you know, just we're going to catch up on things this week, I guess. So, anything exciting happening in your world, Dad? Past week or so?
No, I was impressed. I watched the 3 game series between Baltimore and Atlanta because I have Masson. So um, I was very impressed by those two teams. Both of them, they played very good baseball. It was really good. And the thing that I really liked, the two teams played so well that the umpires seemed to me like they were really into the game, and you had a couple of little close calls, in the strike zone, but the umpires everybody did a real good job. I mean, it was great baseball, and they are two very good teams, and both teams have some veterans, but they've got a lot of kids too, and so they're going to be around for a while. The
Well,
problem,
my one question, Dad, is which channel, who was broadcasting those games? Which is the home team?
well,
Or
Masson is the Baltimore, so I watched the Baltimore broadcast team.
oh, that's right. I was thinking Nationals game. Never mind. It was Braves, Baltimore.
And
Uh,
it reminded me of the old days. I mean, it
right.
wasn't all that strikeouts and power hitting and all that. There were a few home runs, but I mean, they were hitting and running, stealing bases, and playing real good defense. And I just enjoyed it. The
Well,
Orioles' problem is going to be that they have the slowest average for their starters for innings. It's like 4.1, and the bullpen the whole year if he keeps using them like he's using them. But other than that, the Orioles with their young core, they've got a real good team. And the American League East, everybody in a division has a winning record. Where we're going to talk about a team in the Central, and every team in the American League Central, but one has a losing record. Minnesota is the only one with a winning record. So, I mean,
right.
there's a
And
big
that's
discrepancy between those two divisions.
so you're talking about Baltimore having a tough if they can't get more out of their starters, right? So innings, because if you're going to burn up your bullpen.
Exactly.
So they're 22-12 right now. 22-12 without even looking would probably put them first in almost every other division. The Atlanta would be first, but that would put them outside of the NL East first place. Tampa Bay is playing lights out.
I
Uh,
just I just lost you.
oh, did you?
Yeah, I've got a blank screen. Oh, there it is. It came back. It just had went black.
Huh.
We're back.
Okay. Well, Baltimore is 22-12 behind Tampa. Uh, so if they stick with this, you just the second half you got to think with their arms, they just can't keep that up. I mean,
No.
bullpen wise. I mean, I know the Royals played that type of baseball to win their World Series. But they set their team up to be that way. I
Well,
don't think
yes, but
Baltimore set their team up like that.
they would get into the sixth inning, and then they had the seventh, eighth, and ninth. They had those three horses, and they brought them out for the seventh, eighth, and ninth. When they didn't get to the sixth inning with their starter, they had problems.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, if they set themselves up for that, a lot of teams are only got 3 or 4 reserves on the bench, or they got 16 guys in the bullpen. Um, maybe they can ride it out. But in that division, like you said, all of them are in first place. But the surprise is who's in first place and who's in last place. I mean, Tampa is really not a surprise. They just kind of do it for some with
Every
smoke
year.
sometimes they just kind of do it, but not like this. But they didn't. They made one free agent move, but they had so many people come back off of injury. It was like they had a whole new team come back. But with the Yankees being at last, which me and you were talking about yesterday, we want to call them a softball team, team full of DHs, but you would think in a long season they're going to score enough runs off of the bad teams and the worst, the better. I always said with the Yankees, this is what the Yankees feed off of. They feed off of teams' third, fourth, and fifth pitching, and they feed off of bad teams. And that's enough to get them, 100 wins, 97 wins, whatever that amount is. And when they get to the playoffs and have to face the top two pitchers of somebody on the top teams, they have trouble because they have trouble all year with those type of pitchers. If you look at the stats.
And the injury, Stanton's out as usual. Judge is out. When you lose those two guys, that's the core of your team.
I think they announced, though, that Judge will be back this week sometime.
Yeah, he's supposed to come back this week sometime, but
right.
Then he's got to play himself into shape for a couple of games. And I don't know when they're going to get Stanton.
Hip injury, like they're talking, hips are funny. That's kind of like those ab injuries. They can linger. Especially the way they hit using their core and their lower half, swinging that hip open. Judge, even though he plays for the Yankees, he's one of those guys you don't want to see out because he's so good. If I want to watch the Yankees,
it's not good for the game.
Right. And
it's like if Ohtani gets hurt.
Right.
If Ohtani gets hurt, that's horrible for the game.
Right. Yeah.
Even if you're not an Angel fan, Ohtani has to play. There's just certain people on that team that have to play.
Speaking of the Angels, they're in second place right now, 19-16. And they're not getting the greatest starting pitching, but they're just figuring out how to win. I think their bullpen is a little bit better. They got a lineup. They have a very good lineup. And Houston's at 17-17. And Seattle 17-17. I didn't think either one of them would be at 500 right now. And Texas, outside of Texas, I don't think anybody would think they would have 20 wins right now. Of course, DeGrom's hurt.
Texas's lineup has the highest batting average in baseball. That's what they said yesterday.
Yeah, and I guess they got some good bats in which they got the best batting average. You said that Minnesota – it's the only team in the Central in first, which would put Cleveland at 16-18, 2 games under 500 in second place.
And Cleveland is doing the same thing they always do. They have decent pitching. They have very good defense, but they don't hit. They don't score a lot of runs.
Right, and they'll hang around and be battling for either divisional or playoff spot.
If you have pitching, you can compete. That's why Tampa Bay is always so good. This year, what makes them great is they're scoring runs, which they don't normally do.
Right. Well,
they just scoring runs this year in bunches, which they never did that before. Their pitching and their defense got them to the playoffs.
Moving to the National League East. Miami, 1 game under 500. They're playing good ball. I've said it before. You take them out of the National League East, and they'd probably battle for, especially you put them in the Central in either National League or the American League. They're battling for first place, probably.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I've said that for years with Miami, and it's just, it's kind of like Baltimore. Baltimore had so many years being in last, but they're in the American League East. And they don't have the budget that the rest of the teams, Toronto really doesn't either. So it only comes like if they don't do well in the next, 4 years with the groups that they have, they're going to start falling off again. But Central still got the Pirates in first place. We talked about it. They're showing a little bit of what they are because they're playing better teams.
Yeah, they got swept by Tampa Bay, and then they lost the series to Toronto. So I mean, they had to play Tampa and Toronto. I mean, that's the cream of the crop.
Yeah. And I mean, the Cubs are at 500, which I kind of suspected them to be a 500 team this year. They have enough talent, just enough pitching.
I like their manager.
Yeah, that's the type of guy I could see you liking. Cincinnati 14-20. That's kind of what we thought. St. Louis 11-24. Now goal.
And I picked them to win the National League. I bomb on that one.
Yeah, and Goldie had a three home run game last night to win. He's having an MVP year, but nobody else on that team's doing. Arenado, night in, night out, does something at third base that Arenado does. He is just phenomenal at third base.
They have no pitching. Their pitching is
they can't outscore everybody. And again, they have some age in spots, and I think they'd made a mistake sending out. We were talking about Jordan Walker. You got to let these rookies play. You kill their confidence by sending them down just because he goes through a streak where he's striking out. You got to hang with them. Either up there or they're not up there. The Mets are finally playing Brett Beatty on an everyday basis. He's moved up in the lineup from batting 8th to 5th now. Alvarez is playing more and more as catcher for him. You just got to hang with them. And I don't really want to talk about the Mets because I'll probably throw something. Then you got the West with the Dodgers being the Dodgers. I mean, they don't have the same team they had in the past few years, but they're still very good. Arizona, we talked about them yesterday. Oh, my gosh, that young team, they probably got one of the fastest guys ever in baseball. Corbin might steal, if he could get on base enough, he'll steal 100 bases this year. It's just a matter of if he can get on 100 times.
Yeah, I saw him against the Nationals the other night, and he was on first base. And a guy got a base hit to right center field. And before the ball got back to the infield, I think he was on third base. I thought he cut across the mound. How did he get there? And then they showed him running the bases, and the guy absolute fly.
If you hit a single in the gap, he's got a chance to score from first.
Yep.
He's not a big fella, but he is just
and he has some power.
Yeah, and he plays well. He's I don't think he has the arm to make him a 5 tool, but and I don't know if hitting. I want to see how well he hits. You can be fast and all that stuff, but he needs to get on base to be fast. Speed does nothing sitting on the bench. So you got to get, but he's been getting on base. And then they got, Diamondbacks, you got to love them because they got 2 UVA guys on the team. So
yeah, they got a kid from Tech too.
Yeah, yes. And I tell you, the kid from UVA, he's been playing really, really well this year. Diamondbacks is a sneaky team this year, I think. They play in Arizona. Not a lot of people talk about them. They could be a sneaky – I'm not a betting guy, but if you were betting and you wanted to go put a couple of dollars down on a team that could be sneaky, I think that would be a good team to do. I know a friend of mine before the season started tried to put a bet on the Pittsburgh before the season, and it was so lopsided that the sports book wouldn't take the bet. I wonder if they do it now, but before the season start, because it was such a long shot for the Pirates to win it, they wouldn't take the bet. San Diego's in the 3rd spot. They're not hitting the ball. You think with that lineup, they would just be scoring 40 runs. They got good pitching, or decent pitching, I should say. But they're struggling. I mean, they're 1 game over 500. San Francisco, kind of where I knew. Colorado, they would be awesome if they got to play the Mets all year, but they're 14-21, and I think 5 of those wins came from Mets games this year, believe it or not.
Well, at one point, they'd won 4 in a row and 6 out of 8. So I mean, they hit a little streak there where they were in
Well,
half
I
of those
told
games on the road.
you put Bryant. They got Bryant and Dad's a guy in the outfield, and neither one of them. They look like they need a road map to catch fly balls. They are just lost in the outfield. Their defense is not very. They made some. If they didn't score so many runs against the Mets, because last I looked, it was like when I turned it off and going into the ninth, I think it was 11-6 or something like that, and that was from bad fielding as much as it was from anything else for the Rockies. Yeah, they just. I don't know what direction that team was going. You get rid of Nolan Arenado and turn around and pick up Chris Bryant to play third base for you and pay him more or just as much as you would if you would have paid Nolan Arenado. That made no sense to me. Unless Nolan Arenado is like, get me the heck out of here because I can see where this team's going absolutely nowhere. And go into a real baseball town in St. Louis. But that's kind of just a first quick glimpse. The one thing that I did ask you was, has any player really this year jumped off the screen or just really jumped outside the numbers and like, man, this guy is putting on something this year? Because I really haven't seen that this year. I haven't seen a player yet go, I gotta watch this guy tonight to see what he does. Adley Rushman's fun to watch. He leads the Orioles, but he hasn't done that like across the country. I just do that because I watch Adley. But I just Shohei, we watched him when you were here with me, helping my shoulder. He came 2 feet from hitting a cycle and pitching a winning game in the same night.
Yes,
that would have been.
And struck out 10.
He struck out 10. That was one of the most amazing games from a single player I've ever probably witnessed. But we don't see that all the time. I haven't seen a guy yet that every night I'm like, and I have the baseball package. So if I want to watch, if somebody's on a hot streak, I can watch their games unless they're in Atlanta, Washington or Baltimore, then I'm screwed. But if it's outside of there, I can watch it. So has anybody jumped off the page at you, Dad?
No, a lot of what I've watched, it's like everybody's getting used to the pitch clock. Everybody's getting used to not being able to step out of the box. They're almost all of them are using their timeout at bat when they have 2 strikes. I noticed I was watching one of the game last night with San Diego and the Dodgers, and the Dodger pitcher had a count of 1-2, and he was standing on the mound, and he just took his time, and the umpire calls timeout, steps out, points at the wristwatch, and goes 2-2. Charged him with a ball because he went over the time.
Right.
And the announcers, this was the national game on ESPN. The announcer said that a lot of the pitchers are doing this now when they have a favorable count, like 1-2 or 0-2, so that they can
gather themselves.
That they can get their mind right on the mound. They're taking their time. They'll get charged 1 ball. They don't care.
Right.
It's like throwing a waste pitch. So
right.
they figured this out.
Right.
They're going to figure stuff out as time goes on.
I didn't. That's a great point. I haven't heard that, but that makes sense. If it's 0-2 or 1-2, and you're going to throw a waste pitch anyway, might as well get your thoughts collected because it is tough. I mean, some of the, I watch a lot of Mets and Darling. He's from the pitching side. He's sitting here going, man, there's so much you got to think about. You got to think about the clock. You got the thing buzzing in your ear. You got, what's going on, who's got covering what base. All they've added so much to what you got to think about. And then Keith Hernandez is on the other side going, yeah. And as a batter, you're sitting there going, okay, here's the count. What is he going to pitch? What is he favorable? Oh, here it comes. They've really sped up the game, even for them 2 guys that played in a time where it wasn't, people standing around looking at each other for 30 seconds between at bats. So that now that you brought that up, that was a great point. And they, like you said, they're going to figure it out. Just here and there. One thing I have noticed, we were talking about it, is the lack of just playing the game. Like, you, as much as you love that Baltimore Braves series for how well they played, it's been the opposite a lot of times throughout the league this year. Guys not running out balls, home runs, bad plays in the field, just missing fly balls, grounders going through legs. I've seen a lot of bad baseball this year so far. And I'm trying, a lot of times I'll mark it up to, short spring seasons, whatever. But we haven't had any of that this year. They had a regular between seasons. They had a regular spring season. Some of the guys went and played in the WBC, which should have gave them a leg up getting them ready. Have you noticed that as well? I mean,
yeah. And when I say the Braves and the Orioles, the 3 games I watched, I should have had a caveat in there because the night, what's his name, the tall left-hander that pitches for the Braves.
Is that Strider?
No.
Fried?
No.
Fried?
Yes.
I don't know I can't remember.
Yeah, this poor guy could not throw the ball to first base. He threw the ball away twice trying to throw the ball to first base. And they said he never did that before. One of them, he fielded a bunt and he threw it over everybody's head down the right field line. Now, another time he tried to pick a guy off and he threw it behind. He threw it so bad it went behind the runner.
Right.
There was no way that.
And once teams see that, they'll just bunt.
Yeah, and he was just standing there like, what's going on? Because he's considered one of the better fielders. He just had a horrible night throwing the ball to first base. And there was 2 bad plays, and that actually led to the Orioles winning that ball game. But I forgot about that. It wasn't all perfect, that's for sure. There was some other. The one thing that still bothers me is the way I was coached, and the way I coached Little League was when you hit a ball to the outfield, you ran. Once you went around first base, once you couldn't see the ball anymore, you looked for the third base coach, and he told you what to do. But for the last 10 years or so, everybody that runs the bases is craning, looking behind them, trying to find out where the ball is so they know what to do next. Maybe that's what they're teaching them now. I don't know. But to me, the third base coach was in charge of watching the ball and telling the guy to round second and come to third or to stop at second. That's when you turn and look over your head, you lose a step. You lose a step. That's what we were coached. I was coached that way. So, and that's the way I coached. When you look behind you, you lose a step. Right. It's like a football player running down the field with a pass to catch a pass. If he looks over his shoulder to see where somebody is, it ain't going to work.
Well, with that being said, and talking about all of that, I don't have a good segue into tonight's game, or today's team that we're going to cover, other than we're going to cover the Cleveland Guardians. This is for you, my friend Nina. She got mad at me in my preseason. I said it really wasn't much in the Central. Shame on me. There is the Guardians, which used to be the Indians. How long have they been around, Dad?
They played their first professional baseball game 4 years after the Civil War. On June 2nd, 1869, they were called the Cleveland Forest Cities.
Oh, okay.
And they played the Cincinnati Red Stockings in a baseball game. And then they entered 10 years later, they entered the National League. And they played in the National League until 1886, where they joined the American Association. They became the Spiders, the Cleveland Spiders. And when they had to drop the name Indians, that was they considered becoming the Spiders again. Well, anyway, they played in the 1890s, and they had very good teams in the 1890s. And the ace of their staff was a guy you might have heard of, Cy Young.
Yeah.
And then now get this. This is where it gets crazy. Frank Robeson. Now we haven't done this show in a couple of weeks, but Frank Robeson bought the team in 1898. His two brothers happened to buy the bankrupt St. Louis Browns in 1898. He sent his best players to his brothers in St. Louis to help the St. Louis baseball team. The next year, they were so bad, the National League kicked them out of baseball. They didn't have a team in 1900. So in 1901, the fledgling American League came in, and they brought them in. Now, here's another oddity. The opening day of the American League season in 1901, their game was the only one that was played because all the rest of them were rained out. I mean, that's a little trivia.
I never heard that story. I heard the other one where
they were also named the Blues, the Cleveland Blues. Then in 1902, they were the Cleveland Broncos. Then for some odd reason, in 1903, they were called the Naps, N-A-P-S. Not why, I don't know. Then they were given the name the Indians. And in 1914 and 15, a new stadium was built called Municipal Stadium in Cleveland, and it was huge. They could only play there on holidays and special days during the year because it was so big. If they didn't draw a big crowd, they lost money. So they played in another park, smaller park, and that became their permanent stadium in 1947. They did win the World Series in 1920 over Brooklyn, and they were led by Tris Speaker, who's a Hall of Fame player. And then from then on, they didn't really do much. And then in 1947, when they had Bob Feller and people like that, they moved into Municipal Stadium on a permanent basis. And 1 month after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in baseball and was with the Brooklyn Dodgers, Larry Doby joined them in Cleveland and broke the color barrier in the American League. And I remember watching Larry Doby play against Willie Mays in the 1954 World Series because that was the first year we had a television. And Mom let me stay home the first game of the World Series. Because you could walk home from school and see the end of the game, but you couldn't see the beginning because it came on at 2:00. We got out of school at 3:00, and by the time I got home, they were halfway through or 2/3 of the way through the game. So Mom let me stay home, and I saw the catch where Willie Mays made the catch in center field off of Vic Wirtz, turned and doubled Doby off of second base. And that is still called the catch. It was the catch in the Polo Grounds. So, I mean, that was a brief synopsis of their history. And then, I mean, now I will say this. In 1954, when it was right at the end of Feller's career, but they had some great pitching back then. They had Mike Garcia was on that staff. Herb Score was on that staff. Early Wynn. They won like 107 games in 1954, and Al Rosen was the most valuable player. He played third base for them, and for some odd, I mean, they went to the World Series. They were heavy favorites, and the Giants, who had won the National League with about 2 days left in the season, swept them. It just when Mays made that catch and doubled Doby off second base, it was like a boat with a sail that the wind just came out of. I mean, they deflated. I mean, and they just never, and the Giants played out of their mind for the next 3 days. Of course, you know, all the games were in the daytime then. You didn't have to worry about them playing in October when it was chilly because it was usually 55 or 60 because they played in the day. They didn't play at night.
Right. Well, you sat there and asked maybe why the Cleveland Naps were called the Cleveland Naps. Nap Joy was on that team.
There you go.
He was one of their. I mean, Cy Young was on there too. I think Nap was the man.
Yeah, Nap Joy. It was probably Naps because he was the captain.
Yeah. So I was just looking at some of their Hall of Famers. A lot of their guys, when you look at your Hall of Fame list, they didn't play a lot of their career with Cleveland. It seems like Cleveland was a stopover. You got Lou Boudreau and some of his older Larry Doby, Bob Feller. But when you get to, Bob Lemon, when you get to upper years, The guy Frank Robinson. Nobody really thinks of him as an Indian, or Dave Winfield.
Well, he started out with the Indians and then went to Cincinnati.
Right, but you don't really think of these guys. Minnie Minoso played about with everybody. It's then you got the GOAT Harold Baines, greatest of all time. Some of my friends would catch on to that. But the Guardians, we know why they got called the Guardians. I know the Spiders were probably second on their short list, but they have statues around the town, on their streets, on their highway.
Well, they have it on the bridge. Oh, the bridge coming into town, they got the two Guardians on either side of the bridge, and that's where they got the name for.
And it made once they told the story why they're called, it was like a secret, and then they told the story, and then it made sense.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean it's a name. We're already over it. I mean, you named how many names did they have before they were Indians? I'm sure nobody complained every time that they changed their name before that, right?
Well, we saw where the Cardinals changed their name to Cardinal just because some lady told a newspaper reporter that the Cardinal color of their socks, stripes in their socks, was pretty, and,
right.
And it stuck. The Cardinals, the fans wanted them to be called because they were called the what the heck were they called? The Perfectos. They had been changing to the Perfectos. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine Stan Musial playing for the St. Louis Perfectos? I mean, just and
yeah. And
so, I mean, there's all these teams have a lot of different names. So, usually, a real fan roots for the city team, not the name of the nickname of the team, but for the city. Like, I'm a Washington football fan. It doesn't matter what they're called. I'm going to I might not like the name, but I'm going to still root for them.
Well, I mean, I'm a Mets fan because of the players on the team, not because they're called the Mets. I mean, the Indians, they got such a rich history. Why would you, even before they were called the Indians, I mean, you were just talking about, I didn't know about Municipal Stadium, that they couldn't play in it because it was so big. That was, you gave me some great history notes on that. But, that's, they changed their name just to change the name. I don't even think they were one of the teams that was really pressured into changing their names. I think they just did it. I know they were pressured in changing their mascot, the Indian logo that they used to have, the smiling Indian, kind of like the Braves. But here it is. We're 2 years into it, and all we want to see is the product on the field. We don't care what's across your chest. You play good baseball, you play good baseball. It just makes those major league movies a little different now. But that was some great stuff. I mean, you would hope a team with that's been around that long, you want them to be in the mix, and they usually are. You got to give the Guardians credit with what they're given to use, and especially American League, where there's a lot of money teams. They're in the mix every year. They figure out a way to be, around 88 to 90 wins and battling for a playoff,
and they have a Hall of Fame manager.
And they have a Hall of Fame manager. They just figure things out. They figure it, and they're a team that learns early in the season: are we playing for a championship, or are we sellers? Are we buyers, or are we sellers? And early on which direction they're going in, but they don't sell the team for 4 years down. They make key moves to help the team the next year because they're always so close. They're really good.
In the American League Central, you're in the fight. I mean, because there's no dominating team. There's not a dominant team in that division. The White Sox on paper have a lot of talent, but they just don't play up to it. So
they don't scare anybody. You can watch teams play them. That lineup, as much as it should make pitchers scared, doesn't scare anybody. They attack them. they go right after them. But that's not who we're talking about today. The Indians, and I just wanted to bring that up because the Indians just that's what I said. 88 wins, 88 to 90 wins, puts you at the top of that division every year.
Every year.
So you don't have to win 98 to 100 like you do in the East. In the Astros, you got to kind of compete with them. So you're going to have to win 92, 93, 94 to be in there. But 88 to 90, you're in the mix in the Central, and that's
well. And the Astros are in the West, so they.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In the West, you got to come up with.
You got to have, yeah,
you got to have 94 wins to compete to win the division. So, they're in a good division for what they do and handle. And making the playoffs is the first step. Once you make the playoffs, the Phillies proved it last year. Anything can happen. You got to make it before you can get to the next step. So and if you got two pitchers, you can have two great pitchers like the Diamondbacks did when they won it, and then pray for rain for 3 games. Yeah. But you gotta have those front two guys, and if you do, a lot of good things can happen for you in the playoffs. And they have Bieber, and he's a top guy. I mean, I think they're okay. They just need to figure out how to score more runs, like you said earlier. They need a couple of more bigger bats. I love Kwan. He's a guy from Oregon. High percentage on base, high batting average, and he's going to hit like 15 home runs, but he's going to score 100 runs, and he's going to probably, with these new rules, steal his share of bases. I wouldn't imagine seeing him over 30 steals. So I think they got some guys that are really, really good. But with that being said, anything to close out this week, Dad? Anything coming up, or I don't even know what some of the big matchups are right now. I have to look to see who's playing who this week. I haven't even looked. Shame on me, but
this coming weekend is Mother's Day, so
right.
Get that, folks.
This Sunday's Mother's Day. I'll be at my dad's house for part of the weekend. I'm going to spend probably Saturday with stepmom and Sunday with mom. So that's probably how it's going to work for me, I think. So me and him will get to watch some. It just means we get to watch baseball in the same room. Sorry, Susie.
Yeah. Stepmom's going to have to grin there.
Yeah. So until next time, like, share. If you have any comments, any questions, any thing that you would like for us to address or look at, or I've gotten some great people filling in blanks that me and my dad have had, and me and my dad will have many blanks. Oh, yeah. So we welcome those. Anything like that. We love to hear from you. We love to learn, and we love to share knowledge. He's been a baseball watcher for 70 some years, and I've been doing it since he's been on his knee at 1 year old. So I'm gonna say probably about 50 years. Yeah. So until next time, see ya.